Good morning. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon on my coast. Good morning on yours.
Thanks. How are you? It's great to see you, Seth.
You too, Carrie.
We're so excited to welcome everybody today. If you could let us know where you're coming from in the chat, we'd love to hear where you're beaming in to our amazing virtual symposium. So please let us know where you're coming from. We'd love to see. So we're going to introduce ourselves. I am Carrie Ann Quick. You can call me Carrie, though. My pronouns are they or she, and I am coming from San Diego, California. I'm a professor here at San Diego State and an artist and craftsperson, and I'm the co-president of SNAG with
me.
Whichever direction
you are. Hey everyone, I'm Seth Papik. I am coming from Providence, Rhode Island, where I am assistant professor at RISD in jewelry and metalsmithing. I'm an artist. I have a jewelry production business, and I am very excited to be the co-president of SNAG with Carrie. So welcome, everyone.
We're so excited to welcome you to our second edition of Tides and Waves, our virtual symposium designed to expand our worldview of jewelry and metalsmithing. This year, we're excited to explore the history and contemporary practices of West Africa through an incredible array of discussions, presentations, and demonstrations.
We want to extend a huge thank you to all of the presenters for sharing their time and knowledge, and to the planning committee for their dedicated work in creating this amazing event, and to everyone who's supporting the event through your attendance and participation.
The symposium program is divided into themes. So we have Transforming Tradition, On Origins, Fresh Focus, and Exploring Education, consisting of presentations, discussions, and demonstrations. So over the next 2 days, you will have opportunities to listen to the speakers, but also interact with the speakers and with each other.
And if you miss anything, don't worry. Recordings will be posted during the live event in the replay area of the symposium for you to review, and on a password-protected webpage after the symposium has concluded. You'll have a month to watch anything that you miss.
We are so thrilled to introduce our guide and moderator for the symposium, Lamar Gales. Lamar is an archaeologist, independent curator, material culture scholar, and technical art historian. He's currently enrolled in the PhD program in preservation studies and art conservation at the University of Delaware.
Lamar completed an MA in Museum and Exhibition Studies from University of Illinois at Chicago's Muse program, while holding 2 separate positions: Archive and Collections Manager at the Southside Community Arts Center and Executive Director at the Union Street Gallery.
Gales earned a cum laude BA with a triple major, art history, archaeology, and ethnic studies from St. Olaf's College. He has researched and curated exhibitions on Black American jewelry and its historical progressions from the 17th century to the 21st century, including the 2021 exhibition, Divine Legacies in Black Jewelry and Metals, at the National Museum of Ornamental Metals.
Lamar's research methodology combines archaeometry, arts-based research, conservation science, scientific instrumentation, art historical analysis, art-centered ethnography, historical reproduction, technical studies, and qualitative research to explore material and visual culture.
Thank you so much, Lamar, and thank you all for being here. We're so delighted that we can be here together and that Lamar will be our guide for this amazing symposium. We're so looking forward to an inspiring event and engaging with all of you during the sessions.
Yes.
So with that.
Thanks, Lamar.
Perfect. Thank y'all so much for the introduction. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you all so much for joining us today for Tides and Waves West Africa. I have the pleasure right now of introducing our keynote speaker, and then we're going to move into a presentation by her. And then we're going to start, after the presentation, we're going to have a Q&A here, and then I'm going to guide you all throughout the weekend during this beautiful symposium. West Africa, thank you all so much again. West Africa is composed of 16 countries, all with a diverse range of artistic culture and legacies. And right now, we're thinking through a lot of ways of bridging divides between the diaspora and also the continent of Africa, specifically during the Symposium West Africa. The keynote presentation will provide a contextual structure for the symposium through the history, stories, and traditions of this transnational region. Emefa Cole, our lovely and powerful and beautiful and intelligent and strong keynote speaker, is a Ghanaian-born, London-based, independent experimental jewelry artist, designer, maker, who creates sculptural pieces inspired by her African heritage. Cole also serves as the inaugural curator of jewelry in the diaspora at Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Now I'm going to queue up a presentation by Emefa, and then we're going to follow up with the QA. Thank you all so much.
Hi everyone, I'm Emefa and I am a jewelry artist maker based in London. I currently work in the Goldsmith Centre in Farringdon, and I'm also a curator at the Victoria and Albert Museum, where I have a focus on collecting for the permanent collection with a focus on the diaspora. I'm here today to talk about my current practice, how it connects to the goldsmiths in the Ashanti region of Ghana in West Africa, and also to speak about goldsmithing and metalsmithing in general within the West Africa region. So, as I said, I am currently working as an apprentice for the goldsmith of the Asante Hini, who is the overall king of the Ashanti in Kumasi, Ghana. And one of the things that you may know about West Africa in general is how we communicate through symbols, and how that then translates into jewelry, into decorative art and sculpture around, especially where I'm from. And so we have here an Adinkra symbol, and I've picked this because I believe it relates to all of us, and part of the reason we're here. And it's basically a symbol for lifelong education, because it really is important that we never stop learning. We always have something to learn, and I thought this was a perfect symbol for it. I wouldn't attempt to say it in the Akan language, but there is the literal translation, which you can see on the screen. And perhaps after this, you might want to learn more about Adinkra symbols and how we communicate in this way, and how it's passed on from generation to generation. And it's not just limited to Ghana. You will find these symbols in use in Ivory Coast as well, because the Akans live in Ivory Coast too, regardless of the current borders. So this is my master goldsmith in Ghana, who I'm working with. His title is the Buramuhini, which translates to the king of the furnace. And so he is the fire starter. He is in charge of the forge. And he's a very important person. He's the person who makes a lot, in fact, all of the jewelry that we see worn by the current Asante Hini. He also descends from a lineage of master goldsmiths who also did this, and so it's been passed on. It's a bloodline thing, and so it's passed on from father to son and nephews and so on. And I also have to say that in the region, you only find men doing this, and so it's a real privilege as a woman to be to be granted access to the workshop, and also just to be able to work here where traditionally it's men. And when I am there, I'm the only female working with the goldsmith and his team. So it's truly special. This is the Asante King, who I hope a lot of you will be familiar with, and you can see some of the pieces that my master goldsmith has created for him. And when I spoke about the symbols earlier, every single piece that he's wearing has a meaning. These are all proverbs which have been captured in gold. So every piece tells a story. And also the fabric has a meaning. So this is very carefully curated. But to someone who doesn't know the meanings, you just see a beautiful woven kente fabric, and you see a lot of, very large sculptural pieces of gold. And so that is quite important for us to notice, that this is not just adornment for adornment's sake. There is a meaning, and when you remove it from this world, it loses meaning. And so that's something that I'm learning about the hidden meanings behind jewelry, and that it's not just bling, as some of us like to use. And you can see here again more sort of different pieces to the first picture. And on the right hand side, you can see the golden stool. And this is the embodiment of how special gold is to the Ashanti. I switch between Ashanti and Asante. They are the same thing. In Ghana is actually Asante, and Ashanti is the sort of English way of pronouncing Asante. So forgive me for that. It's it's a bad habit. So the golden stool was believed to have descended from the sky, and it houses the soul of the Asante. It is a very, very special stool, very well looked after. There have been wars fought with the British, specifically relating to the stool, but that's not what we are here to discuss. Gold itself as a material is very, very special, like I said, to the Asante. And up until the early 1900s, it was currency in the region. We didn't have paper money or coins as we do now. Everything was, all transactions were made using gold. And so there is also a very rich history in gold weights, which related to the currency back then. And you can still find a lot of gold weights in museum collections. You can find them in circulation in various places. And those are also the little proverbs that you see cast in gold. You would find those also in the gold weights. The porcupine is the symbol for the Asante, and it's quite a powerful symbol. And they have a proverb which, if you kill one, many more will appear. And so I think that is such a powerful proverb, and it's actually very true. They're very, very resilient people and warriors. And yeah, the porcupine just sums up what the Asante spirit is. Yeah, very strong spirit. I have more photographs here of some of these beautifully cast pieces. Obviously, not everything is cast. You can see the chains on his neck. They haven't been made using the lost wax casting technique. And so one of the things that we should be we should all be aware of is that jewelry making and techniques are universal. And so what goldsmiths are doing here, goldsmiths are doing all over the globe. What makes the Asante techniques very special is that they have a very unique way of lost wax casting, where they can create these large, extremely large pieces, but in a very controlled way where they are comfortable to wear. So they're not heavy. They don't have to be. The goldsmith can decide how weighty the piece should be, depending on what they want the finished product to look like. And I think that it gives you this freedom to be able to think on a larger scale, because it's not restrictive. And yes, it is a slower process of making. It requires a lot of time and patience. Patience, number one. And because of the unique way of casting, if it doesn't work, then you have to go back and start all over again. But that is not necessarily a bad thing, because we learn through making mistakes, and that's the only way that we become better at doing things. And as I said, Nana has come from a lineage of master goldsmiths, and so he has a lot of skills, and so he knows. Working with him is an eye opener, because the incredible level of patience that he has for making is something that I'm learning from, where I was impatient before, and you just want things to be done and you want it to be right. But if it doesn't work, you just have to take a deep breath and start all over again. And so that is something that has really helped me in my making, and also embracing, for me, taking it a step further, embracing the imperfections in making, that it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect, but I always have that option to recast if need be. I just need more time. So in West Africa, which I cannot speak for the entire continent, and in fact, I cannot speak for the entire region, but I can say that Ghana, where I come from, is filled with art. The whole place is filled with art, whether it's carvings, wood carvings, furniture, paintings, metalwork, pottery. It's all around us. It's functional. We use them as it's around us on a daily basis. So you don't have to go to a museum to see these pieces. They're in the homes, but they are used, and they all have they've all been made to be functional, to have meaning, and so there's a purpose behind the making, but they are well used and well loved objects. And they also document the history of the people, especially when you look at the Benin bronzes, which I have on this slide. And it's also a way to teach the younger generation about the wisdom in the proverbs that are passed on from generation to generation. It's very common for conversations with elderly people to start with a proverb. There's always something that you will learn from it. It might not necessarily be what you want to hear at the time, because some of them are not very polite, but it relates to whatever the situation is that is being discussed. If somebody needs to be advised on you know, doing things properly, there'll be a proverb to suit that. There's proverbs for every situation in life. And so when the younger generation are taught the meanings of these pieces, they can look at the ring and be able to put a whole story together from just the one piece of jewelry. You know, I just love the incredible. It's just endless, the endless proverbs that we have, and the way that they're captured in metal is something that I find extremely fascinating. The use of color, the importance, and as I said, if you're not well versed in this, then it's difficult to tell, to be able to get any meaning from this outfit. But I can speak to the goldsmith, or somebody who is highly skilled in reading proverbs, and they'll be able to tell me exactly what's happening without me needing to sort of make up stories about the gold. So that's enough of all that beautiful gold pieces. I'm just showing you here how some of the pieces are achieved in Kumasi with the master goldsmith, and is completely different to the way that I work in wax in London, and how a lot of people work in wax in London. When I'm working here, I start off with a block of wax and I sculpt whatever shape I want sort of grows out of this block of wax. In Ghana is different. So you have a very special mix of clay and charcoal, and there is a precision to the mix, because if it's not right, then your casting will fail. Once you've got your desired mix of clay, you then sculpt the shape, the form that you want. And this is what Nana is doing here. And it takes a very long time, because you have to pound the charcoal and the clay mix in a pestle and mortar until it's super fine. You shouldn't be able to feel any grit in the mix whatsoever. And then that needs to dry in the sun, and then once it dries in the sun, in this sort of rough state on the left hand side, you then get the dry pieces where you continue to sculpt it. And so you can't create a finished sculpture in the wet clay. And so it also depends on the weather. If it rains, then it might take a week to dry, because you may get 2 hours of sun. But if it's really hot, then it dries quicker. And so it's this patience that I was speaking about. You have to surrender to the things that you can't control, which the weather, and other elements, and you just have to go with the flow. And that sort of puts you in a very zen, relaxed state, because it's work that cannot be rushed. Just showing the difference, where you've got these pieces here, which we'll come back to, hopefully to show you the more sort of finished pieces. I sculpt straight in wax, and then I send it off for casting. It comes back, and then I continue to shape the metal to the desired form. If I was to make this with the Asante way of casting, number one, I could make them a lot lighter, and in gold. But because of the way that I work, these are, you really do feel the weight of my pieces, and so I can't always do them in gold, but I can make them in silver, and I can gild them, and I can make them in bronze. I can gild them, I can oxidize them, just whatever patina that I wish to apply to it. And so my current apprenticeship is, how do I blend what I do and also add some of the ways that the Asante make their pieces, to create something that's uniquely mine. Because the purpose of this apprenticeship is to learn, but I'm also aware that we cannot keep going to other cultures and stealing their techniques and claiming that we are genius, because I'm not. And so I'm very very transparent about what I do, where I get my inspiration from, who I'm learning from, who helps me to make my pieces, because all of these voices are very, very powerful, as powerful as my own. And so it's important to stay true to myself, but to learn and acquire more knowledge, and to see how that then informs pieces that I make in the future, as I sort of transform as a maker, because that's the hope. I don't wish to be in the same place next year. And so it's just constant development. And I'm just learning from masters from around the globe, and just how they apply themselves to their work, and that laser focus gaze that they have on their work. And yeah, it's it really helps to ground me, to look back and reflect on my own work, and it inspires me to do better. Again, these are other pieces that I've made using the traditional lost wax casting techniques that I've learned in Britain, and so just showing you a few more pieces, and then now we go back to the Ashanti pieces. So you can see here, if you look at the twin crocodiles, one is completely smooth, and then one we started to apply the texture to. So we carve into the clay and charcoal mix to get the skin, the crocodile skin. And then on the right hand side, you can see sheets of very fine beeswax, which we've prepared, and then that will be applied to the clay form. And I find this, it looks very simple. So I'm used to working with, as I said earlier, a block of wax, specifically ferrous wax. And I've become so used to it, because as you practice with a material and you become very intimate with it, you know how to work it, you know how to you become familiar with it, and it becomes very natural to work it. And then you think of a material like beeswax, which is extremely soft, but also extremely brittle, and so it has to be worked at the right time, because when it's too soft you can't work it, when it's too brittle it just cracks. And this is what I find completely fascinating about the Asante lost wax casting technique, is that there's a precision, there's a science behind everything. And so we have a tendency in on this side of the world to call this practice primitive, and it's far from. I think it's very advanced, and it requires a lot of material knowledge and experience and skill to be able to make something so difficult look so easy. And so it's just opened up my world completely. And also it's let me know that anything is possible if you really apply yourself to taking your time and learning a skill. There really are no boundaries. You can keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And so pieces are ready on the right hand side to have the beeswax applied to it. And here we are applying the beeswax to it. And again, everything takes time. And so on the right hand side, you can see the sort of little sort of logs of beeswax, which we would have made flat, and then also very fine, which has been applied to the crocodile on the left. And then there's a special tool which you make, and every goldsmith has their own, because you as you are applying the beeswax, you also need to make sure that the your little wooden tool is kept moist. And again, something very universal, you would put it in your mouth to keep it moist. If you're super OCD, you can always dip it into water. But it becomes it's a very personal relationship with the tool and the model that you're working on. So I've come to this because when I went to Ghana the first time for the apprenticeship, because I was aware that I wasn't going there to copy, I wanted to see how the wax pieces that I work on here can be cast using the Ashanti technique. And it was very interesting because the master goldsmith was also learning from me, because he doesn't use ferrous wax. And so we then had a conversation about how we're going to cast the rings that I've carved. And he very quickly came up with, he looked at them for a few minutes and he said, right, I know exactly what to do. And so he used a very similar process to what he uses on his pieces. And it's this sort of fusion between using the beeswax to make the spruce and dipping my pieces in clay until we had enough, until we'd created enough of a gap for the wax to be melted out and for molten metal to fill that void. So this was a huge experiment for both of us, and yeah, it was quite nerve-wracking. But it was also interesting because it was a time where we were just learning from one another and just experimenting. So when the pieces that I've shown you have been made, they are then invested into individual molds. The wax is then burnt out, and then the crucible filled with silver or gold or brass is attached to it, and then it's fired and powered by bellows. But you know, these are not machine powered bellows. You're using your hand, and so it takes hours. I keep going back to time and patience and just waiting patiently to see if something works or not. And then yeah, it's put into the furnace, and it, depending on the type of metal that you're using, that would determine the amount of time that you need to keep the fire going. And another thing that I found magical was that they can tell from the color of the smoke coming from the fire, when the piece is ready. And this is again something that you need to be very, very aware of. So you're watching as you are fanning the flames, you're keeping an eye on the smoke, and you can tell at which stage the metal is melting, and at which stage it's filled, and at which stage to stop and take the pieces out. And so here we have a piece that is ready. So you need to, it goes in with the void of the mold on the top and the metal filled crucible at the bottom. Once that melts and it's ready to come out, you then take it out and you flip it over, and the molten metal flows through to fill that void. And then you have to, of course, wait for it to cool down a little. And then there's this nervous moment where it's either a successful casting or it's not, and you have to repeat the whole process again, or you'll be very happy and you're good to start on another project. And so for me, these were the pieces that we cast using ferrous wax and beeswax combination. And I personally feel that for the first time in trying this technique, it worked. It's not perfect, but the imperfections actually made these rings very special. Now I will move over from the Ashanti region to Senegal, to the Gambia, Mali, where we're now looking at filigree work. Absolutely stunning, fine pieces made again, which will require so much patience and time and dedication to make. And this just goes to show you how universal the techniques are. We have filigree in Europe, we have filigree in West Africa, using the same techniques, using the same tools, the same sort of style workshop. So then I started to think of how we're more connected than we realize, and it truly is a very universal thing. And so I can find a filigree master in Portugal, for instance, who would be working in the same way as a filigree master in the Gambia. And again, just looking at how the combination of techniques, where you've got the engraving and these just beautifully made talk. This is a talk. And again, another close-up of some of the filigree work here. And then these beautiful Tuareg style earrings, which with the marks and the glass, the recycling of materials. And that's another thing that I find across the region. Everything is recycled, nothing is thrown away, and it's been like this for centuries. And so where we sort of hype up recycling here, well, actually it's been done in many other parts of the world, and it's the way of life there. And so we're not really doing anything new here by recycling, and we're not the leaders of recycling. This is happening in many regions across the globe, and it's nice to see how you can turn found objects and things that we throw away into beautifully made pieces of adornment. This is in the collection of the Goldsmiths Company, and you can see a photograph of the lady wearing this beautiful ear cuffs. And it's again, the detail is just incredible. These are very, very delicate pieces, but you can see how, for instance, when we look at body piercing, and you can have the entire lobe pierced, but actually you don't need to. You can just wear something like this, which gives you that same effect. And obviously it has meaning. So there's a meaning behind the woman wearing the pieces. And that is, again, is not just a gold ornament. We've got these very famous style of earrings, which again are beaten gold, and the larger they are, that shows how wealthy the husband of the woman wearing these earrings, how wealthy the husband is. And so if I'm wearing a very small one, then my husband isn't very wealthy. But if I'm wearing a huge, huge one, then it's, you know, it's a status. It denotes the status of the family, of the wearer. And so, I mean, this lady here has they're quite large pieces, and then it's on this beautiful silk threaded piece that goes through the earlobe. And I think these can be very weighty pieces. And then you can see with the tiny, tiny rings which are in the hair, you can see where the metal has been twisted to give that sort of that texture. And so, as I said, the techniques for me, they are universal. They're universal goldsmithing techniques, and you will find this everywhere. The only difference is that in this region, the jewelry comes packed with a lot of meaning. And we've got this lady here with very huge gold earrings. And so she's obviously married a very wealthy man. And these are just exquisite pieces. The level, the granulation and filigree, and just the metal smithing in general, all round, beautifully made pieces. And this just goes to show how highly skilled goldsmiths were in that region in the past. And I'm really hoping that through videos like the ones that you find on the Toolbox initiative, that, you know, it shows you how these pieces are made. And those are actually very good videos to watch. I can sit there for hours and watch them, completely mesmerized by the dedication and the focus of the goldsmiths making this, and the way that they make the tiny little beads for granulation, and how that could be. There are obviously differences between somebody who is a master here or in France or Italy or Portugal or in the States, you know, but the end product is still there are similarities in these pieces, and actually we need to see more of these pieces on this side of the world because they truly are exquisite. I spoke earlier about gold weights, and this here is a gold weight, and it's based on the Sankofa bird, which is a symbol for sort of looking back at the past and making things right. And so it's a very popular Adinkra symbol, and you'll see it in sort of stamped jewelry, you'll see it on necklaces, you'll see wood carvings, and it's just interpreted in many different ways. Sometimes there's an egg on the back of the bird, and the bird has turned back to pick up the egg. And so again, it's a proverb, and I really would encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to look at Adinkra symbols, and not only Adinkra symbols, but symbols in general, and how universal that is, and how we translate symbols and words into jewelry. But this, when gold was currency, to weigh gold dust. And so that is the end of the slide. But I will leave it on the Sankofa bird because I think that's actually it's a good place to stop and to speak about how I keep mentioning the things that connect us rather than the things that separate us. And also the magic of metalsmithing in general, whether it's blacksmithing, whether it's working steel, whether it's working gold or silver or bronze or brass, whatever it is, there's this magic, the magical element that, and through taking something and transforming it, and the process of transformation itself is it's a really beautiful thing. And I feel that if we all have the chance, we should travel as much as possible and spend time with metalsmiths in different parts of the world, and just observe how they work, how they transform metal into beautiful objects, and how we can also teach them some of what we do and learn from them. So there should always be a sort of a skill, just transferring skills to one another, learning from one another, and that is the way that we will be able um, to keep the magic going. You know, the importance of metalsmiths globally, I think, is truly special, and it just makes me think of makers who we have now, um, like um, like Giovanni Corvaja, for instance, in Italy, who is just the most incredible maker I've seen to date, and the way that he transforms gold into these beautiful fine pieces of wire, thinner than a hair strand, and it's just pure magic. And I think there is this real um, alchemy going on with metalsmiths globally, and there's this power that comes from learning to work with metal. And oops, sorry about that. There's this power that comes from the transformation of metal, making it into objects that are wearable, objects that we would just, you know, have on on our shelves, on our tables, that we eat with, that we, you know, even beds. It's just a really powerful skill to have, and it really does transcend worlds, and it puts you, I find, working, especially in solitude, puts you into this meditative state where you can dream, and you can explore the endless possibilities with metal. And I think that is something that I'm finding unites metalsmiths globally. And it's a really beautiful thing to be able to step away from your own work and to observe how other people are making, and just learning from it. And it just adds so many layers of richness to your own practice. And it opens up your world to other cultures, and then it brings you back to full circle, where you realize that there's not much difference between us, and we're all doing something um, very special, and what we're creating will outlive us. And you know, for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, the pieces we're making will live on. And so it is important to be making pieces that you want to live on. um, and yes, so I'm just in awe of metalsmithing in general, and the magic behind it. So I just want to end on the importance of the customs and traditions of specific regions where these pieces are created. And they all vary from, even within Ghana, the pieces and their meanings vary depending on the audience. So if it's not made for Akans, it will have a completely different meaning to a Ga or a Fanti or an Ewe. But because we all sort of live together, we inhabit the same land side by side, we learn from one another, we adopt the traditions and customs of other people, and it becomes more sort of a blended thing. And so again, that is something that starts to unite us as people, when we stop looking at the things that make us different. And so when I think of metalsmiths in that region, and I think of metalsmiths in the UK and elsewhere, I just always go back to my favorite my favorite metalsmith of all, who in Greek mythology, and it's Hephaestus. And I just think of him in the volcano, just creating the most beautiful pieces, and that is it. That just being the king or queen of your forge, of your furnace, and just allowing yourself to dream and to allow the magic to happen as you're making, and freeing yourself from restrictions, the things that we keep thinking that we have to fit into boxes and be defined by specific techniques or specific styles. It's just something very freeing when I start to think about metalsmiths in a more sort of, in a fantasy way, the magicians, the alchemists, the Vulcans or Hephaestus, depending on whether you're using the Roman god or the Greek god, and looking at the power that blacksmiths hold in parts of Africa, where they're also the medicine man, and people go to them because they're so revered, and it's just all magic is beautiful, and it's freeing to think of it in that way, and it just makes everything possible. So I really do believe that there's so much to learn from the history and the myths and legends of metalsmithing, and I really hope that inspires all of us to keep pushing the boundaries, and also to pay attention to the living masters we have now, like the master goldsmith in Ghana, like Giovanni, and all the amazing masters who are just working magic and pushing the boundaries every day, and they're here now, and it's such an incredible time to be living. And if you're anything like me, I used to sort of just be in my own world, and I do not look at what anybody else is doing. But sometimes you have to come up for air, and you have to really look at these incredible masters, and it just fills me with so much joy. And just like I said, watching the videos that I find on the Toolbox Initiative is just a dream. Is to be able to escape into these workshops in Senegal and in Mali and the Gambia and Ghana and Nigeria and Benin and all of these regions, and just to listen to the rhythm of them making, the sounds of the tools, the filing, the shavings, and just watching them work is just, it's a dream. And so I really hope that this has been inspiring. I hope that you do go and look at these videos that you will find on YouTube from the Toolbox Initiative. Check out Giovanni Covaha, and I hope you are as mesmerized by his work as I am, because honestly, for me, he is the modern day Hephaestus. And so again, focusing on the regions, but looking at the things that bring us together, the things that connect us, is very, very important. If we start there, it will make things so much easier, and we can learn from one another, we can celebrate one another, and there's so much more to be done when it comes to metalsmithing. So thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the symposium.
Alrighty, everyone. Fabulous. That was an amazing presentation, very enlightening and very informative. Now we're about to be joined we're about to be joined by Emefa Cole. I'm about to bring her on stage now. How are you doing, Emefa?
Hi, Lama. I think I'm lagging slightly. There's a delay, so let me...
No worries. So this is a very inspiring, inspirational talk. And now we're going to take some comments and questions from the audience. So thank you. If you all could please feel free to type in questions into the chat, that would be great. I guess one question I have, Emefa, I guess, how do you feel like your inspirational connections with West African jewelry traditions connects to your curatorial practice at the Victoria Albert Museum?
Sorry, it's quite noisy here. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you totally great.
We can, perfect.
So,
how does it connect to my curatorial practice at the museum, to be quite honest, it's a part of it, but it's not a main sort of focus. Because my role at the DNA is to acquire. Lamar, can you see me?
Yep, we can all see you.
You can, perfect. I'll just have to put up with listening to myself.
I'm sorry about that.
So what I was saying was that it's a part of my role, but it's not a major focus of my role because I'm there to collect from the diaspora in general, and we have to remember that at any given moment in time, we can all be part of a diaspora. So,
that makes perfect sense. So I think moving on to questions from the audience, one person named Sherry Cordova asks, when there is a tradition in leadership in the Ashanti, how does the essence of the sword transition between the leaders, since the sword contains the soul of the leader?
that's something that I'm not an Ashanti historian, and so for the person who's asked the question, I would just suggest that you do some research online because I don't want to give you any information that is false. I just don't have that knowledge about the leadership and the concerns of the soul to somebody else. So I don't know.
I get you. That makes perfect sense. Carrie Ann Quick asks, can you elaborate on the symbols used? Is there a certain dictionary that is used to read them, or is it only through Goldsmith visuals knowledge?
No, it's not just through Goldsmith. It's through the entire Ashanti, and not only just the Ashanti in Ghana, the Akans in Ivory Coast, and the Gas and Ewes, all the different ethnic groups in Ghana actually know how to read the symbols, and it's not just in metal. It's on fabric, it's on wooden carvings, it's on so many things, and so you learn how to do with spoken language. You learn how the symbols do, and it's passed down from the older people to the younger people, so it's kept alive that way. But now you can find books that explain what the symbols mean, and it's widely available online.
Yeah. I think of a few visual books and texts that kind of reference that. Mazi Odu asks, or wanted to know, what do you think about the developments of techniques as they travel across the flow of the West? How do you think the developments and techniques had to do with migration flows across West Africa?
Hi, Mazi. That's a really good question. I think it's interesting because as the techniques sort of move through the region, things are added to it, and everybody sort of adds their own take on it. And I noticed some of this in one of Matthew's videos, where the granulation and the way that it was being done, I believe it was in Senegal. And the playback is really annoying. Yes, so everybody adds their own take onto it, and that's the beauty of it. So each master develops their own way of working, and that is passed on.
Gotcha. I guess as a closing question for this chat, before we migrate over to sessions, so there can be an informal, casual conversation with Emefa, which again is located on the left of your screens underneath the stage button. Emefa, one of our visitors or one of our viewers is asking, after your first attempt at bringing both worlds together through the casting processes, have you had any other successful or interesting failures in your practice that you can touch on?
Yes, I have. So I've come back from Ghana. I went to Ghana this year in May, and I went to continue my apprenticeship. And again, I took pieces made with my ferrous wax, and I had a majority of it was successful. Some of it didn't come out whatsoever, and so we broke the mold, and there was nothing really in there. And yeah, it's been it's been great because, as I said, it's a surprise when you break the pacing, whether you get something or not. So it's just one of those things that I had to. I was very happy with the successful casting, and I just had to say goodbye to what didn't come out. And yes, it's been good. I'm having a lot more successful castings with less faults than the rings that I showed in the slide earlier.
Powerful. Thank you so much for joining us for this quick Q&A, Emefa. We'll see you soon in the session's casual conversation. Thank you so much.
See you soon. Bye-bye. Bye.
Hello, everybody, again. Please feel free to join Emefa and myself in the casual conversations, which are going to be in sessions. So again, it's underneath the stage button. And once you click stage, or click sessions, you'll see a casual conversation with Emefa pop up. Thank you so much. And we'll be joining us again here soon, back on stage during the break for this particular program, which will happen after Emefa's conversation or casual conversation, which will end specifically at 1:45, sorry, 1:45 Eastern. And then we'll be back here for a break, which will end at 1:55 Eastern. And then we'll be starting part 1 of our program on origins. See y'all soon. Thank you so much.
Hi.
Surprise!
Woo. Maybe I hope our recording started. This will be on recording.
Hello.
Yay, hi.
Oh, Emma,
Hi,
that was so wonderful.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I was panicking about the whole thing, and it's yes, I'm glad. Okay, and I'm so sorry I can't stay for long on the discussion. It's just I have to. I'm at the Goldsmiths Fair, and so I'm currently in the livery hall, and we need to pack and leave the building by a certain time. It's very strict, and so yeah.
I wish you could give us a tour.
Oh my god, I could. Do you guys want me to walk around?
Well,
I really could.
People might have questions for you.
Yeah.
But let's see. Maybe you could. That was so interesting that the symbols are universal across cultures. I'm so interested in looking more into that sort of shared language. It's so interesting that a visual language like that. Are there any books in particular that you think are better than others? Or I mean, of course I can Google this, but
I don't. There are a few, but to be honest, it's also down to interpretation. And so you have to be mindful because it's similar to how one person interprets the Bible or the, whichever religious book. It's all about, but if you look for the very basic meaning, that is usually the same. And so, yeah, if it's like an essay on it, then I'd say be careful. There is also proverbs themselves are a major part of Ghanaian culture. And so it's either through the symbols or words. Some of the words do not have symbols, and the goldsmith has to then create one in their own artistic voice. And those are the pieces that I find really interesting.
Yeah.
So I have a collection of proverbs that were given to me by the goldsmith, and it was his way of taking just words that do not have a visual representation and turning them into sculptures. And I've seen other people do it, and it's all very different. So yeah. Hi,
Wow.
Mazzy.
So fascinating.
Hi.
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 Hi, Tanya. Hi.
Can you hear me? Or should I type in the chat, Lamar?
We can hear you.
So I wanted to ask, brilliant. So Emefa, wonderful presentation. And I wanted to ask something because you touched upon it in your presentation about the similarities and commonalities Why do you think that West African metal craft has historically been so othered when you look at sort of the jewelry historical canon or creative canon? I mean, what are your thoughts about that? And also, what do you think the 21st century, the fact that we're all here on this platform, what opportunities does that sort of offer to bridge certain gaps? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that it's been othered purely for the reason that it's African, and historically the way that Africans have been, it's been sort of dating back to the beginnings of making African a lesser than human. There's no way that Africans can have fantastic goldsmiths. So it has to be either inspired by somewhere else around the globe. Like how could Africans create such beautiful pieces? And it all links to your ethnography and categorizing people and making people who look like you and I lesser human than the European. And so that's purely the reason, because when you put the pieces side by side, the craftsmanship and the everything about the pieces, they're excellent pieces. And it's funny because they've been othered, but they are. If you look at the Asante loop across the globe in various museums, including the one that I work in, the DNA, they're beautiful pieces. And so that alone answers the question. It's there's a contradiction, because if it was so ugly and so terrible, why is it so coveted? And so, and also this notion of other, yes, we are all influenced by other cultures because of migration, but to always say that something which is beautiful and African was either inspired by Europe or by the Arab world. Okay. Oh, I have to leave soon. Or sort of, oh, it's from Egypt. Everything is Egypt or Europe or the Arab world. Nothing from any area that has historically Africans who look like you and I. It's just pathetic. It's a lie. A lot of people believe it because they don't ask questions. And I think as humans, we need to ask more questions. We need to unlearn the conditioning of, how we've been conditioned to believe all this nonsense, and start doing our own research. Like Matthew, I loved your videos. I think they're great. It's, watching some of the makers in the Tuaregs, where they don't necessarily work from a workbench, but they use their feet. I think that's just amazing, but they're still producing really good pieces. There are obviously levels of craftsmanship, but when you look at on the slide, I showed the pieces from the Goldsmiths collection with all the beautiful granulations, obviously from maybe the Gambia or Senegal or Mali areas. And then you compare that to the Tuareg silver piece, which is a lot more, there's a simplicity. It's not as elaborate as the gold pieces. So there are levels, as there are in every part of the world, when it comes to the skill of the making, but it doesn't diminish the pieces just because they're made in Africa. I hope that answers your question, Mazzy. I'm so sorry, everyone. I've got 7 minutes to pack up and lock up my cases and leave the Goldsmith Hall. So would you mind if I stayed on for another 3 minutes or so?
That answered my question, Emefa. It was brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's the fancy goldsmith. Yes, they do. They do, because the pieces break. Sherry, the pieces break, and so they do have to melt them. And that is also a practice which is universal. Goldsmiths everywhere do this, and we recycle. So where we have this hype about recycled gold, gold is always recycled. Gold is never, ever thrown away. We've never lost gold. And yes, they do get remelted and remade into new pieces. How many apprentices does the family? I suppose as the boys are growing up within the household, they all start learning how to make, and then they decide whether they'll be goldsmiths in the future or not. But they're all very highly skilled from a young age, and they keep learning. So if they need to, especially when you are from the house of the royal goldsmiths, it needs to pass on to someone.
Hi, Emefa.
Hi.
I had a quick question because I know you have to leave really quickly. But I put it in the chat and it was like, do you find that some of the proverbs and symbols lose their full meaning when they're translated to other languages or taken out of context? And does that come into play when you interact with, like, the master goldsmith that you work with?
No, with the master goldsmith, it never loses its meaning. These are like the masters of the Akan language, masters of Akan culture. They are the guardians. Like these are, it never ever loses its meaning. I think Adinkra symbols are overused. They're just stamped out, they're cheapened globally. And I think that's quite sad because it just makes it readily available and it becomes less. But the proverbs that the goldsmiths are working with are slightly different, and majority of the time they are from words rather than the symbols. And it's the artist's own interpretation of the words, creating that visual sculpture that you can tell which artist created it because everyone sort of develops their own language. But the symbols that I do believe are overused are Adinkra symbols. It's just, there are Sanka for birds and Jinyami signs everywhere. And if you're going to do it, just do it beautifully. Don't just stamp it from a piece of silver or brass and say that it's jewelry. But then that's up to the maker. Hopefully, as we all develop, we learn to become better. I'm just a bit of a snob when it comes to that stuff. I think we can do better. I'm so sorry, everyone. I have to go. Because otherwise the security will be like really cross with me. So it was lovely seeing you. And Matthew, I would love to catch up with you at some point, and I'll watch your presentation, and Mazzy as well. I'll watch the whole thing back. And thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emefa.
Bye, everyone. Bye.